in our lives. And so I thought that it was necessary to be able to bring this kind of conversation to the body of Christ, to those of us that are going to have to deal with this reality sooner or later. The reality is all of us are going to die at some point in time. The question is about preparedness. Are you prepared to die? And that's a question that I believe that all of us must wrestle with, because we do not want to pass on the burden and the responsibility of loved ones and friends to take care of our affairs and our business after we're gone, and we ourselves did not make the proper preparation. So I'm excited, Gwen, to have you with us tonight, and Scotty, to have you with us, so that we can just have a fireside chat and to help inform those that will be viewing the broadcast tonight, and to give them some insight as it relates to the funeral home industry and various aspects of the process, the mortuary science side of it. And as we conclude Black History Month, I wanted to honor a woman who is a great soul. She's gone on to be with the Lord. But Xavier Hightower, as we honor those heroes and sheroes of our African-American culture, Xavier Hightower was a pioneer in the mortuary science industry and field. She was the very first licensed female embalmer in the state of Kansas. And so, given the fact that I had the privilege of serving as her pastor for several years, and getting to know her and the invaluable contributions that she made to the community of Wichita, Kansas, I wanted to give an opportunity to honor her. And when I had a conversation with Gwen and Scotty and got a chance to know them a bit better, I came to the understanding that Gwen is currently the only licensed African-American female embalmer, as well as owner of her own funeral home. And that is the same as Sister Xavier Hightower. She was the first African-American female licensed embalmer here in the state of Kansas. And so I thought that that was an interesting parallel and dynamic, and wanted to be able to get you guys together and have this conversation tonight. So again, thank you for everyone who is tuning in and viewing the broadcast tonight. I want each of you who will to like our Facebook page, as well as share it with family members and friends, because this is a conversation that is going to help you become more prepared as you deal with death and dying in your own family. And so we have an arrangement of questions that we're going to share tonight. And I pray that you're going to be blessed for the time that you've spent here with us. I'm going to give Gwen and Scotty an opportunity to introduce themselves. Gwen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Holder, for inviting us to this conversation this evening, a much needed conversation. But my name is Gwendole Ray Hicks, and I was born and raised in Manhattan, Kansas. And I actually got my calling at the age of 16, sitting in psychology class. And I said to myself, Father, I have one more year. What are you going to have me to do? And he called me to the vocation of funeral service. And it's been my ministry ever since. And he gave me the vision of ownership. I said, okay, my steps have been ordered, and I went to Kansas State. I did a year, and then found the Kansas Community College Mortuary Science program. Now, my goal was I wanted to either go to the Dallas Institute or I wanted to go to Gupton Jones in Atlanta. And my parents found Kansas Community College. They wanted to keep me close to home. Manhattan's 2 hours away, Kansas. So they kept me home. They kept me close. And I started my training at one of the local funeral homes. I was going to school, got married, started having kids, but I still kept my course. Still, my steps were ordered. So it was, I'm not going to deviate from this. This is what I was called to do, and I'm on a path to get it done. And it has been an interesting journey. I love what I do, and I do what I love. And it's an awesome ministry for me.
Let me ask this, Scotty, Mary and Gwen, You've been a great supporter of hers. You work in the industry with her. How have you been able to be a support to her in the line of work that she's been called to?
Wow. Wow. Okay. 8:20 on a Friday night, 2000, not 2000, 1992, when we met. Our first date, I asked her, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And she took a deep breath and she laid out the funeral industry. She wanted to become the first minority funeral home owner in Manhattan, Kansas. And she wanted to do that by the time she was 32. She set a date. I said, wow, impressive. We got married. I seen this passion. The amazing thing about it was she was going through school, and one day I asked her, I said, how does it feel to touch, the loved ones? And she said, I've never touched one before. I said, wait a minute. You're going through this, you're going through the process, you're going through school, you're paying for school, and you've never touched the work product? And she said, no. So we touched the first one together. That was meaningful. I had the opportunity to see this passion up close and personal. And I've never seen it at a depth like that before, where you are really pursuing this and nothing is getting in the way. And so it was just a matter of seeing her go through the process and acclimating the kids to mom is studying. Mom is we asking mom questions because she's preparing for a test. So we all just became involved. And 40 days before her 32nd birthday, we opened up Northern Star Mortuary and became the only minority female funeral home owner and licensed mortician in the state of Kansas.
So as I really wrap my mind around all of that and go back, Gwen, to your preparation, schooling, and then working with a particular mortuary in the Kansas City area, that's really where you cut your teeth. That's really where you got your start. How did that experience help you to move to this place of ownership? And also, two-part question, understanding the needs that family have when their loved ones pass.
Well, I did my training with one of the local funeral homes in Kansas City. And my thing was, okay, if I'm gonna own this, I'm gonna run this like it's mine. And so I was at one particular location in 2000, and it was, the funeral director was, no longer there. I had to take over. So what can I do to help my community and my families? And it was, okay, I need to make sure that everything is done in order, properly, decent, in order for the families. There are so many logistics to making arrangements for the families that you have to make sure that everything is just done properly and right. My training, it was for a year. I did a year of internship. And then again, I was already working with the funeral home, but training as well. And so during that time, it was, women weren't in the area of the funeral industry where we're out there. So I said, well, you know what? I'm gonna put myself out here. I'm gonna start driving the cars. I'm gonna start funeral directing. And I need to see what the needs of my families are because they're not being met. Now, as a growing up in Manhattan, there was only 2 funeral homes there, and seeing how, they ran their funeral home and took care of the families, I decided, hey, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna be that funeral director that when I come in, the families know who I am, because I'm sitting in front of the families making the arrangements. They don't want to see somebody else. They want to see your funeral director and that staff. So I trained to the point where I ran that funeral home like my own. And it was to the point where I had hit the glass ceiling because you know, it's a very male-dominated field. There's now 65 to 70% of women in the industry. So now, you know, it's, hey, let's get the women in, let's get them trained, and, you know, let's get out here so they can see us, you know,
So you spent time learning the industry from the ground
from
up
the ground up.
to prepare you for what you knew your purpose and calling was.
Yes, sir.
And that is so critical in this particular day and time when people are already skeptical of people who are part of the funeral home industry and things of that nature.
Exactly.
And we're going to hit on that a little bit later. But I want to dive into some questions that I want us to just, conversate on, and you guys to give your insight on one of the things that we know is happening right now is that funeral costs are escalating. And it is projected that over the next 15 to 20 years that the average funeral can be between $20,000 and $30,000. Well, the reality is most people do not have $20,000 or $30,000 sitting around that they can spend to bury a loved one. And so we have seen in this particular social media age and these various platforms, we've seen GoFundMe become a source of revenue for families who have not positioned or prepared themselves for this experience we call death. There's an old saying that there's two things in life that are sure: death and taxes. The reality of it is all of us are going to die. We're going to have loved ones to die. But unfortunately, in the African-American community, and it's not just the African-American community, it's spread through all communities. But because we're celebrating Black History Month, we're dealing specifically with our community. That so many of our families are ill prepared when it comes to taking care of the business of burying their loved ones, and even loved ones who are leaving the responsibility to family members and friends, and they haven't made the necessary preparations. And so, Scotty, talk to me about trauma on top of trauma. You're dealing with the death of a loved one, and then when that loved one has not made proper preparations, they now have more trauma that the family endures, because the family is now trying to pick up the pieces, determine how they're going to get their loved one buried, and it becomes a nightmare. And so people have resorted to GoFundMe as a life insurance policy. That is not a smart plan for trying to bury your family. So what are some things that you can encourage families to do in preparation to this reality we call death?
Okay. We had a situation where we are sitting here with siblings, and there's 4 siblings sitting here. And now they are discussing among themselves how they're going to come up with this cost, what's not going to get paid, what's going to tighten up in their own household in order to get mom buried, funeralized and buried. Now, they made it happen. But what they could have done is come to us prior, sat down, made the arrangements, locked in their cost, and then they could have together made a monthly payment that would have paid for mom's services, burial, and set them up to where they could take care of a few necessary items on their own table. And that's just proper preparations. And we're kind of, in our community, we're kind of spooked by just having the conversation. I tell a lot of families, you need to gather the family around and have this conversation one time. One of the things that families don't realize that we run into is that if there is a daughter and a son that disagrees with how mom should be buried, the funeral home stops, until they come to a decision, because they're both legal next of kin. That means that if we follow the daughter's wishes and not the son is in position to sue, and vice versa. And this happens when you don't prepare. We got to have the conversation. We got to talk about, okay, what happens? Because we're dealing with it here what in our own family, where we have lost the matriarch. And how do we move forward? Here's a person that now we have to think about, like most families, who do I go to now to ask the questions that I need answers to? The person that I normally do that with is not here. Now who's going to fill that void?
Let me ask this. In terms of families trying to put the pieces of this puzzle together, dealing with loved ones who leave them with the responsibility of burying them, these family members, I've done it on numerous occasions where I've had to go to the funeral home. I've made the funeral arrangements. I've signed my name on the promissory note to pay. And that funeral home is looking to me now to be the responsible person to come now and to pay for that funeral. Are there programs out there? Are there insurance policies that Northern Star can direct families to in advance of a loved one passing, so that they will not have to shoulder the weight and the responsibility, the burden of burying someone when they're not adequately prepared to do so financially?
We do, Pastor. We have Assure for Life. And it's a program where we can put 7 loved ones on this program. And the program, you spend $245 for the first 3 months and then $75 for each month. That's a program we have. We have Great Western Insurance Company that's coming in, as a matter of fact, on Wednesday, the 2nd, to present their product. And see, the thing is, and what I was looking at, we sent out mailers for this seminar, and 9 people responded. And what I got out of that was, okay, these 9 people are ready to be talked to about the funeral arrangements in the funeral industry, because they're looking at now, okay, I need to be prepared. I need to protect my family is what I really need to do, and leave a legacy. So we have options out there for the families. It's just, we need you all to come in and talk to us. Don't be scared. You know, we're human too.
And let me ask this question. Why do you think, and this is to either one of you, why do you think that those who are part of the African-American community are so reluctant to talk about death and so reluctant to get the necessary coverage so that they can be properly put away, as well as leave resources for family members who still have to live after they're gone? And I see that predominantly in our community, because other communities, they get life insurance policies. Those life insurance policies pay out when that person dies. Once the expenses are taken care of, then the family has an excess in resources from that policy to be able to transfer wealth on. And that's something that we do not take pride in as Black people enough. You know, whether you leave that money to your family members, to organizations that you are part of, to your church family and things of that nature, for ministry to go on after you leave this earth. And so what do you say about that, Scotty?
Well, one of the things that becomes a roadblock is that we pay too much attention to all the negative stories that surround funeral industries, to the point where we don't get past that to go to the funeral homes and ask our own questions. We don't get the answers that we need that, you know, benefits our family and our needs. We just listen to the stories, and those are the horror stories. You know, you have a bad funeral, you know, you're going to tell everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we listen to, and we get that perception. So we find ourselves in a position where we don't go to the funeral home until we need the services. And once you're sitting down in front of us, one of the things I found out as I came into this industry supporting my wife is that our community don't know the process.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the policies that exist. They don't know all the different avenues that they can take advantage of to pay for the service, pay for the burial, and transfer wealth. You know, we have programs set up to where you can replace 1 to 2+ years of income from the loved one that has passed. Sit down and let us show you this. and we can tailor-made some to your budget. We don't get to that point. So now it's, okay, let's start the conversation. Let's have the conversation. Let's create a platform where we can answer those questions and put aside some of those fears. So that's why we're here having the conversation.
It's interesting, and I share a bit of my own personal story. My grandfather, God bless and rest his soul, he lived with the philosophy that I'm going to die broke. He was not interested in lining anybody's pocket after he had died. And so he had a life insurance policy that was just enough to bury him. And I think that even though he thought that that was a good idea in real time, the reality was he still left my grandmother behind to deal with life after his death. And so when you have a husband or a wife that dies and there's just enough to pay for their burial expenses, that spouse who is left still has a whole life to live without income that otherwise would have been coming in. And so I think that it is imperative for every family to sit down, to have this uncomfortable conversation in advance so that you can determine what is it going to take for the people that live in my house to live and survive beyond my expiration date. And so I don't think that that is a conversation that, we are willing to have enough, but it's necessary if we really love our loved ones the way we say that we do, then we will not leave them in a bad situation once we are gone, but we will make the right preparations so that when we depart from this earth, that they can pay for our funeral. They're not out, robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're not out begging other family members to come up with enough to pay for the funerals, because it's getting so tight now that funeral homes do not even want to deal with a body if they know that the family doesn't have the resources to be able to pay, because so many funeral homes have taken the brunt end of that deal and had to bury loved ones without getting paid. Has that been you guys' experience? Gwen, can you speak to that?
Yes, sir. That has been our experience. And, our process is 48 hours in advance. We want to help who we can. We want to help our families, and we try to do the best. Now, the average funeral right now is $7,848. Now, just an example, the most expensive cemetery in Kansas City is $35.95. So you take that.
Now, is that opening and closing of the grave?
That is the plot itself.
That's the plot itself.
The plot itself. The opening and closing is $15.95. So now you're looking at $51.90. Okay. And that's just the cemetery. That's the cemetery portion.
So hold on. You've got almost $5,200
in cemetery
cost alone. Now,
yes,
I
sir.
want everybody that is out there watching tonight, I want you to understand what Gwen's talking about. Before you even have a funeral, there's roughly $5,200 that you've got to come up with in order to deal with the cemetery.
Cemetery portion.
Okay,
now,
go ahead.
Now, we have to add on the cost for the funeral. So you have cemetery, you have funeral home. Now you're looking at $13,000. $13,000 will get you buried. However, do you have the insurance for that? Because you're going to need at least $25,000 to cover your services, because we haven't talked about the headstone item. So there are,
and you're talking about funerals on the high end.
On the high
right
end,
now.
on the high end right now. So that's why a lot of the families are going towards cremation, because cremation is more of an affordable option for the families. So we get families in and say, well, Ms. Hicks, we don't have the money for traditional funeral service. What can we do? Well, your option is we can have a viewing and then cremation. And you got to keep in mind, embalming is not required by law unless we have a public viewing. So there are so many options out here for the families. It's just we need you all to communicate with us and let us know what you all want out here, because it's expensive.
And mind you, cremation in the African-American community and our faith has been taboo for a long time. And so there was a long held belief that, you were going to hell if you got cremated.
Right.
And so we since understand better that, you're not going to go to hell. We serve an all powerful God. And if he was able to create the earth, heaven and earth, and create man, certainly he can put ashes back together again. So, cremation being a new form of funeral services for African American has really been one that's been driven by necessity, because many African American families have not had the resources to be able to bury a loved one. So cremation has become a secondary, in many cases now, the primary choice of a lot of families. And so that is something. And what is the normal cost of cremations right now, and juxtaposing that against a burial versus cremation?
The cost is between $1,000 to $3,000
for a cremation.
For cremation, that's direct cremation. Now, if you want a viewing, then that's added cost on top of the cremation. So say, for instance, our basic is $11.95. And if the family wants to have a viewing, we add on $250. So we're $11.95 and $250. And, again, it's just whatever the family wants and how we can accommodate the family to accommodate their pockets. We want to help as much as possible, but we are a business too, because we have vendors we have to pay. We have to pay for the cremation. We have to pay for the casket if you want to rent the casket, if you want to buy the casket. We still have to look at the vehicles. So if you want a limo, they cost. So everything that we do, there is a cost. And yes, we ask that the money is paid up, 48 hours before service time, because we don't want to get in that rut where now we're behind and paying the vendors. And then the next family that comes in, well, there's no payment plan. The only payment plan we have is for pre-need. So that's just, where we are in the funeral industry as far as how we're taking care of the families. And, when it comes to the economics, the financial part of it.
So one of the things that I hear both of you saying in the conversation is, because of your understanding of the industry, your own credibility, character, your passion for the families, you want to always put yourself in a position to do right by that family, irrespective of sometimes your own comforts. And so there's a great sacrifice that comes in that. And that's one of the things that, really drew me to you guys when we had an opportunity to sit down and conversate, have dinner together, that you cared about families, and that it wasn't just about trying to put a family in the most expensive funeral, knowing that that family was going to have to live after they got that loved one buried. And so, Scotty, tell me, in terms of your experience with families, what is that interaction like? And mind you, that they're grieving, they're hurting, they're trying to put the pieces of this thing together, and you've got to encounter them from the very first phone call. When that phone call comes into you guys, and immediately something in you guys clicks, that we've got a deceased individual, but we got a family now that's going to need our services. And what has that experience been like, Scotty?
Well, one thing you can do, we've been in this industry long enough to where when we get the phone call, we're able to discern from the phone call whether or not we're dealing with someone who has everything together and in order. The conversation is different versus someone who is now dealing with the death, as well as now trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to take care of this? That sound in the voice is different. When they walk through the door, it's a different movement. It's a different atmosphere they come to us with. The difference between being prepared and not, we can tell. And now when we sit down with those who are not prepared, who simply never ask the question, I tell families this all the time, especially people I talk to. Ask yourself the question, if you need, this way you would tell whether or not you need the conversation in the family. And that question is, if I was to die right now, who's in charge of my disposition?
Mm.
Who will be in charge of going to the funeral home and sitting in front of the funeral director? Will they be able to afford it? Do they know what I want? You know, am I still living off the taboo of no cremation? You know, do they know what cemetery I want to be buried in, and next to who, you know, in the family?
So you're dealing with now honoring the wishes of the deceased,
Exactly.
which so many times is not honored and valued.
It's not.
And that can create turmoil, long-term strife. It can really fracture family members. And that gets us to the point of dealing with family disputes when it comes to the death of a loved one. And I've lived it. I got the t-shirt, I got the coffee mug. I know that it can be a treacherous situation, and it ruins families. And there's loved ones that have not spoken in years because. And so for our audience that's viewing tonight, you need to make sure that the persons that you leave your responsibilities to, one, are credible, and that they're going to follow your wishes to a T. And so that is so imperative. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead and finish as you were talking.
When the families come in and they are prepared, the way that conversation goes is this: they will call the funeral home, they will talk to the funeral director, let Mrs. Hicks know that, okay, mom has passed. Because we've already had this conversation, we've already sat down and make arrangements. Now the conversation is go. Everybody know what to do now. Everything is left in the hands of the funeral director. We know what to do. We know what processes to put in motion. That helps with the grieving process because it takes the burden off the family of sitting here in this process and going through the numbers and, you know, we're going to change how many limos we have, yada, yada, yada. This is done beforehand. You lock your price in. You don't have to come see us because only thing you have to do now is give the place, nursing home, a hospital, let them know that we're the funeral home that's coming to retrieve the loved one. And we already got time, place, all of that's figured out.
Get in to that a bit, because I know the last time we had dinner, we were talking about this very thing, about the chain of custody. When one funeral home comes and gets the body, and then the family decides that they want the loved one to be buried through another funeral home. Either one of you take a stab at that.
It's simple. Here's the simple thing. When you have a death, do not give permission to the funeral home to embalm. This is what happens. Before you go in and sit down, you've already incurred a bill. That bill, the first bill is the removal. You're going to get that cost.
So that's taking custody of the deceased.
You're going to get that cost. Now, if the funeral home goes ahead and embalms before you sit down, you have that bill that you have incurred.
Which now, where are we financially? And we've not even made any of the big decisions yet.
With Northern Star Mortuary, you are over $1,000.
Just in those two movements right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With our embalming fee and our removal fee. Now, what we do is we don't embalm because there's two things that are going on. When you come in and you sit with Northern Star, you are evaluating whether or not you want us to perform the service. And we are also evaluating whether or not we want to perform the service for you. So if there is at that moment in that moment of making arrangements, if there's a decision, we're going to go somewhere else. Now we, Northern Star Mortuary, don't put the burden on the family of having $1,000+ bill with this funeral home plus one over here at this funeral home. It is much easier for us to not hound you for the removal fee versus saying, hey, we have put chemicals, you know, and we need to recoup that cost.
And this typically happens when families are not on the same page.
Exactly.
Perhaps there's an older sibling that is there when mom or dad dies or what have you. And so they think that they're in charge. And so they're going to call someone who they want to come and remove the body. And then other siblings get there a day or so later and a week and they go through this whole thing. Well, who has mom or dad's body? Well, I sent mom and dad to so-and-so. Well, that's not who I wanted them to go to. And so now you've got this big, internal argument that was unnecessary. And that goes to the point, again, of being prepared, sitting down with loved ones and having an open, candid conversation about, listen, these are my directives.
It's like you said, carrying out the wishes.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, babe. That's where that durable power of attorney comes in.
And what is that again?
A durable power of attorney. So if you can have medical and financial decisions, and then the durable power of attorney can also state that they can take care of your arrangements after you pass away. So as long as you have your durable power of attorney in place and you designate an agent, then nobody else can come in and say anything.
So these are legally binding documents that the families and the funeral homes have to respect because they are legally binding.
Legally binding,
Correct.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Correct. And it goes back to what you said about honoring the wishes. You have this loved one that may be favored this funeral home and this loved one's favored this funeral home. But what supersedes all of that is mom said she wanted to go here. And if we are honoring mom's wishes, this is where we take mom, regardless of how we feel. And proper preparation, all of that's lined out. The phone call is made. Now we sitting on ready, set, go. It's go time.
One of the things as we make our way through this conversation tonight that I want to deal with is this whole issues of wolves in sheep's clothing. And that's dealing with the dark side of the funeral home industry, because we realize that there's families that get preyed on every day. And that is something that I've seen. It's very hurtful. It's damaging to families because they're already suffering the loss of a loved one. And then when they go to a funeral home, they've got tears in their eyes and they're trying to make decisions for mom, for dad, for a child, for a brother or sister. They're trying to make that decision in an emotionally charged state. And it's never good for you to try to make these type of major life decisions when you are so emotional. And then what happens is there are funeral home directors who are not always ethical and who do not always practice their craft with morals and integrity and with the highest of character. And so I know that you guys have heard the horror stories. And so how do you encourage families to deal with their loss in a manner that they will not fall prey to these funeral home industry wolves?
Simple. Call Northern Star Mortuary with your questions and we will answer them for you. The best way to go through the door is go through the door prepared. Maybe you don't have everything in line, but you know what to hear. You know what to listen for. You know when you hear something that, whoa, Northern Star Mortuary said this supposed to happen.
Now, Scott, I need to stop you right there because you just made me like you even more. Because you said call Northern Star with your questions. You didn't say call Northern Star so that we can be the ones who take care of your loved one. Not to mean that you wouldn't want to service these families, but your concern was that their questions be answered. And I don't see that type of openness and transparency and willingness to help families in this type of a situation. And so I want to thank you guys for being that way, because it lets people know that you're not just out for what you can get out of them, but you want to offer them a service that means far more than the money will ever be. If you can keep a family from enduring additional trauma because they've been taken advantage of, that's honorable, guys. And I want to celebrate the both of you for having that type of a character and ethics about you in this business where it can be a dog eat dog world. You know, everybody is out grabbing, you know, and then here's another thing, the aftercare of that loved one. We've heard so many stories about things that the deceased have endured as these funeral homes take possession of their remains. There's some crazy people out there that will do things to the deceased. And I know you guys have heard it, you know, and how do you assure families that what you do is always above board and with the greatest ethics and respect for that? I mean, because it can be laughing at the deceased. You know, the deceased may have some deformities, various other situations. And, you know, we're entrusting our loved ones into your care. And then to find out through somebody that gets mad, who's working in the funeral home, and, you know, they let out, well, you know, so-and-so said this about so-and-so's loved one, and so-and-so did this to your loved one. And those stories get out, and those are real things that happen. You know, tell us about how you guys guard against those type of things.
Simple. Respect the dead. You respect the dead. You respect the family. You can't, at least I can't think of anything that I can go through in life that can compare to picking out a casket for my wife, my daughters, you know, my grandchildren. So, you know, when you mentioned the dark side, one of the telltale indications is when you walk through the funeral home door and you sit before a funeral director that is void of any compassion for what you're going through. That's when you know, okay, maybe this is not the right place for me. I don't get that feel. I don't get that vibe. I don't get that energy where I'm sitting in front of someone that cares. You know, we have an opportunity where we deal with a lot of students from the Kansas City Mortuary Science Department at KCK Community College. And we speak at Professor Lenore's business course twice a year. It's a required class for mortuary arts students. So we get an opportunity to get a bird's eye view of the students where we can interact with them and talk to them and ask them questions. And we're basically interviewing them. And what we're listening for is those students that have that passion, that possesses that passion of taking care of families, of the love of the science of mortuary science. That's what we're looking for. And it's easier to convey that message to them. Respect the dead. You know, when someone, you treat someone's mother like she's your mother, you do the same thing to her that you want done to yours, because we know in the industry that our mother's going to come through here. So karma, treat them like you want yours treated, you know. So that's an easy practice for us. That's something that we, you know, really stress. And we tell our funeral directors, if you are dealing with knucklehead kids, I got a couple of my own, I love them to death. You and your spouse is bumping heads, we've been there. Let us know so we can put someone else in front of this family, and you take the time to deal with what you need to deal with, and then come back in a different frame of mind in order to get this done. Because they're here to pick out a casket for a loved one. They don't care about my kids being sassy. They don't care about me and my wife arguing over whatever's going on in the house. They're trying to pick out a casket. You know, you have to be conscious of that. That has to mean something. If it don't, then you're in the wrong place here with Northern Star Mortuary.
I want to talk about the social and emotional aspect of losing a loved one. Over the last few years, I've lost more than my fair share of family members in 2020, January 1st, that day will live with me for the rest of my life. I received a phone call that my own mother, who was just 60 years old, had lost her battle with lung cancer. And it devastated me. Several years back, I lost my grandmother and my grandfather. 5 months after my mother had passed, her brother had died. I'd lost a couple of other uncles and cousins in that same time period. And, you know, I didn't have adequate time to be able to grieve. And pastoring, serving as president of the Kansas Baptist State Convention, and all of my other responsibilities, being a father, working in the school district, I wear a lot of hats. And so I basically hid my pain behind all of the responsibilities that I have, and I never adequately grieved. And the pain of their passing still touches me to this day. I go to sleep with it. I wake up with it. And I want to encourage every person who has felt the sting of death to understand you've got to pause your life and grieve. It is all right to grieve the things that you think are so important in life. Listen, they are always going to be there. They're not going anywhere, but you've got to be in an emotional space so that you can deal with your own life. You're no good to anybody else if your life is coming undone because you haven't dealt with your own emotions, if you haven't reconciled the passing of loved ones in your life. And so I want to encourage you as a pastor of 25 years to get help, get counseling. If you've got to see a therapist or somebody that can help you to process this pain that you're experiencing, do not bottle it up. That is the worst thing that you can do, is to bottle up your pain, because at some point in time, that is all going to come to a head and it is going to be explosive. I know, Gwen, you just lost your mother, and the difficult reality of losing a mother, the matriarch of your family and things of that nature. And I know what it feels like when mama's gone, that empty feeling that you have. It seems to be irreplaceable. You hold on to previous text messages that they sent. You hold on to the last voicemail that they sent when they were trying to get a hold of you. I have yet to remove my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother's, my uncle's phone numbers from out of my phone. And sometimes I'm tempted to call it, but I know that there's not going to be anyone on the other end of that line. Talk, Gwen, if you will, about just the emotional aspect of losing someone that's so close to you.
Wow. Mom was 75 when she passed. We lost her 3 months ago, November 2nd. As a matter of fact, a day after my sister's 39th birthday. So
Wow.
Megan turned 39 November 1st. Mom passed November 2nd. I got that initial call at 4:30. Dad called, and I knew it was time for me to take that ride down to Manhattan and pick mama up. We got there to the hospital. They said, hold on, can't do anything until Gwen gets here. And when we got there, she passed away peacefully. She was still warm when I got her, and I just hugged her, and it was very emotional. But then again, it was like a relief, because now mama is not in any more pain. But it was just the fact that, okay, mama's not going to be here anymore. So what do we do? How do we cope? Because, you know, we still have family distension going on, and we need to get everything together. We got to get on one accord with one another. My brother, my sister, my dad, and myself, we're the ones left behind. So it was like, hey, I got to pull up my bootstraps, and I know what I got to do as a funeral director. Okay, I'm going to get everything together. However, what I did do, I had my intern, Amber Lee, and my trusted friend, Tamara Clark, who is the chief embalmer at Bowser Johnson Funeral Home, come down and help me out, because I did not want to do the embalming process on my own. I thought that was a little too much on me. I was already doing the obituary, taking care of the obituary, taking care of and coordinating with the casket company and coordinating with the cemetery. So I already had a lot on my plate. But just knowing that my mom is at peace and knowing she's playing the piano, her cello, violin, viola up in heaven puts me at peace. Now, what really got me was for Christmas, my girls got me a bear from Build-A-Bear. So the little one kept asking me for voicemails. Mom, I need a voicemail. I'm like, well, why? And I finally gave it to her. And come Christmas Day,
Wow.
both my girls gave my father and myself a Build-A-Bear with mama's last voicemail on there.
A keepsake.
For a keepsake. And I listen to it every now and then, but it just gets to me because we're still fresh into it. It hasn't even been 6 months yet. But I'm just at peace knowing that I and my family were able to take care of mom in a very dignified, lovable manner. And that's how we treat all our loved ones. When your loved one comes to Northern Star Mortuary, they are treated just like our loved one. They are taken care of properly with honor, love, respect, and dignity. That's how it's going to be.
Let me ask this, Scotty, how do you properly grieve? And I know you guys being in the industry, so you have to compartmentalize. And so when mama, when daddy, when a loved one does come through, how do you set your professional side aside and now deal with the grieving process? Because now your son, whatever it is that you may be, your relationship to that person that passed, you're now dealing with the reality that somebody that I loved, somebody that may have invested in me, poured in me, believed in me, now they're gone. What do I do with this ball of emotions before I'm controlled by it? How do you grieve?
The 5 stages of grief, I actually thought I had it down packed until it hit home. The hardest part for me was practicing what I preach. You know, mom is here. We're taking care of mom. We have to go through this. So everything became surreal. You know, I'm no longer, you know, I gained a even greater level of respect for my wife because you're actually dealing with your mother. And at the same time, you have to be strong in front of the other families that we are also preparing their funeral services.
And they know you've lost somebody.
And they know you lost someone. And they are leaning on you for strength, you know, preparing their service. And I seen my wife go through it. And it was amazing to watch because it's like, wow, she's an incredible woman. Because I know that I wasn't capable of, I wouldn't have been able to do anything for someone. I was a mess, you know, because now it's personal. The family, I got an opportunity to see how families break down. And that's because everybody is going through the 5 stages of grief, but everybody's at a different stage.
Wow.
And now it may be a moment where you're angry and I'm sad, and that causes friction, the slightest little thing. And what made it easy for us was to focus on mom's legacy. And mom's legacy was family. She devoted herself to her family. And we had to come to a realization, if we are going to honor mom's legacy, we as family, the legacy, we have to stand fast and be strong.
As we get ready to wrap our discussion up tonight, and this has been fascinating, I have been encouraged by all that has been shared tonight. I want to say to our audience, you've got to deal with it before it deals with you. And as relates to when a loved one dies, if there's anything that I can do tonight is to encourage each of you to make sure that you're doing everything that is necessary for you and your loved ones to be able to die in dignity and in peace. And more importantly, that their business is going to be handled as they wished. And that's going to keep down a lot of friction and frustration and fighting in the family. And so I want to make sure that every person that is under the sound of my voice tonight, every person that has heard what Scotty has shared and what Gwen has shared, I want you to make sure tonight moving forward that you are beginning the process of sitting down with your loved ones and you're putting your wishes in a directive so that they understand what it is that you want to happen, that you're trying to identify. Insurance companies, you need some life insurance, whether it's term life insurance, whether it's whole life insurance. You need a life insurance policy that fits your pocketbook. And if you do that, you're going to put your family in a much better position to be able to take care of your needs. It's going to reduce the amount of stress that they have to incur when you leave this earth. If there's any questions that you have, I want you to make sure that you contact Gwen and Scotty at Northern Star Mortuary in Kansas City, Kansas, as well as their location here. And listen, if there's any of y'all who are retired, you sit at home throughout the day, Gwen and Scotty are looking for people that they can employ right here at their location here in Wichita, so they can make sure that it is properly staffed. They would be excited to possibly employ you in their funeral home here. And if you find yourself in a time of need that you need somebody that your pastor is promoting, I'm not getting anything out of this. They've not greased my palms. All of this is being done free of charge. But we wanted to make sure that we were putting ourselves in a position to empower. And the way we empower is to inform. And so we want all of our families in our community to be informed as it relates to everything that goes into the funeral process and to better understand the funeral home industry. There's going to be some contact information that is on the screen momentarily as we get ready to wrap up tonight. But Gwen, give us 30 seconds. Scotty, give us 30 seconds as we get ready to say goodbye tonight, as we have enjoyed the participation from our live stream audience tonight, sharing when a loved one dies, a candid conversation about the funeral home industry and the aftercare of the deceased. Gwen, if you go and just give us a couple of seconds, closing remarks, anything that you might want to say, and then Scotty, and then I'll close us out.
I just want my families to know that we are out here to serve you, love, honor, respect, and dignity. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, give us a call at Northern Star Mortuary. We love to talk. We love to make sure that everybody is taken care of. So we're friendly. So please just give us a call and let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. Don't be scared. Let's talk. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Gwen.
Northern Star Mortuary, 4 principles that we stand on is knowledge, passion, compassion, and faith. That is how we move through our services. That's how we serve our communities. And we're passionate about the work that we do. If you have questions, just need answers, call us. Thank you.
Again, thank each of you so much. I have had a wonderful time having this conversation with you. It is a much needed conversation in our community. I want to thank our audio video team for also being on hand tonight to make sure that they were able to capture this moment so that our families will have something to be able to hold on to that will give them insight into how they move forward in this process. So again, to our viewing audience, I'm Dr. T. Lamont Holder, Senior Pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church right here in Wichita, Kansas. My beloved guests, Brother Scotty and Sister Gwen from the Northern Star Mortuary in Kansas City, Kansas and Wichita, Kansas. I'm signing off. God bless you and God keep you is my prayer. Bless you, man. Bless you. Thank you.